Today we're going to be taking a look at Chapter 1, Worlds Apart. This is when Europe first began colonizing the New World. We're going to be taking a look at some key figures like Columbus and others that followed him. And we'll start in just a moment. Let's first start by asking, should Columbus's discovery be celebrated? We've heard about this guy before, but should we care about what he's done? Should we celebrate what he's done? The second question we are going to focus on is what brought these European powers over when they came? What specific conditions in Europe allowed them to come when they came? Many of us have already learned that Columbus didn't actually arrive in India, of course. Where he did arrive was in the Bahamas, within the Caribbean Sea. So why is it that we take such a close look at a guy in American history who didn't actually reach America? And what exactly did he do here? Before we look at such questions, though, let's first understand that this is a man who generates enormous support and/or condemnation and vilification of his actions here in the New World, both then and today. 1992 marked the 500th anniversary of his reaching the New World, and it too generated enormous protests. But why all the controversy? Well, much of it stems from the fact that Columbus helped perpetuate a number of long-lasting stereotypes of not only the Taino, but many of the New World peoples. These stereotypes were both past and present. We see a number of these incredibly negative stereotypes being portrayed in cartoons, in political cartoons, paintings, advertisements, like Land of the Lakes, Butter here, even sports teams. There was very little understanding of the people that he encountered, the complexities of their societies, the different gender roles, the different stratification within them, who held what roles in society. All of these were things that many of the Europeans were ignorant of. These were a people that, despite the European missionaries' greatest efforts, still managed to maintain many of their cultural norms and their religious practices well after they arrived. The Taino certainly weren't the only dominant culture within the Americas. The Mayan civilization was an incredibly developed civilization, as were the Aztecs and the Incas. Just take a look at some of their works of art and their architecture and the pictures to come. Some of them might even look a little familiar to you. Much of our time thus far has been spent on looking at the pre-Columbian societies in the Central and South America, but what of those in North America? What we can see here is that they were incredibly diverse. But again, our primary impression of Native Americans is still fairly limited, even today. What do we imagine? We imagine bare-chested Indians next to teepees. How accurate is this? Well, fairly accurate for the Sioux Indians, which were a dominant group right up until the late 19th century. However, the Powhatan were a dominant group, as were the Pueblos as well, yet we hear very little of them. Both North and South American natives, though, were devastated by smallpox and other diseases given to them by the European powers. This, more than any other, decimated their populations, making it much easier and, in some ways, justified, at least as far as the Europeans were concerned, to exploit that land. So, let me get this straight about this Columbus guy. He has no clear sense of direction. He commits genocide on the people, exploits their labor sources. Why again are we celebrating him? Well, the biggest reason is that his discovery led to a vast network of trade between the two hemispheres that had never been seen before. And many of his discoveries paved the way for others. And while the Chinese and maybe the Vikings had reached the New World, it wasn't until Columbus had come that many others followed him in very quick succession, starting with a number of Italian explorers, but followed by English explorers, Dutch explorers, French explorers, all of them seeking to carve out their own path in the New World. At the same time, we can't gloss over the horrors that Columbus and many who followed him committed upon the native peoples. Between outright genocide and utter enslavement of not only the natives of the area, but labor sources that they imported. So, in the end, we have to ask, was this guy a hero? Should we continue to honor what he did here in the New World? That decision is up to you. Let's end our exploration of Christopher Columbus with hearing some of his own words regarding the Taino people in October of 1492. He states in his journal, "In order to win the friendship and affection of that people, and because I was convinced that their conversion to our holy faith would be better promoted through love than through force, I presented some of them with red caps and some strings of glass beads." He goes on to say, "They must be good servants and very intelligent, because I see that they repeat very quickly what I told them, and it is my conviction that they would easily become Christians, for they seem not to have any sect." Let's broaden our focus now and look at the larger continent. Why is it that Columbus began his journey in 1492, and why was it from Spain? And how is it possible that both Spain and those other European countries that followed him were able to do so relatively quickly? What was going on before? Well, for starters, not long before the exploration of the New World, the bubonic plague had hit the continent, wiping out over a third of its people, making such ventures virtually impossible. Initially, Columbus had actually gone to numerous European countries, trying to proposition them to go to the New World, all of which had turned him down. Spain was uniquely positioned, though, having recently succeeded in the Reconquista and removing the Moors from Spain. Without that internal struggle, they could focus outward. Moreover, technological innovations like the compass rose, the gunpowder through the cannon, as well as the printing press, spread not only the desire but the ability to go to the New World. Technological innovations like the printing press also help spread new ideas that also help shape new religions. Not only Lutheranism, but whole new ideas like Calvinism were cropping up in areas like England. This opened the door wide open for all kinds of new religious exploration. Not all of it was started by Martin Luther, though. Henry VIII also contributed to the schism, largely with the development of the Church of England. And while Elizabeth was no religious zealot, she did differ with her sister, Queen Mary, about what path England should take. Unlike her stuffy older sister, Queen Elizabeth was also much more supportive of the arts, which is why you saw the likes of William Shakespeare and many other artists flourish during this period. And it was much of these funds that would be used to explore the New World. And this proved very helpful in later challenges to Elizabeth's rule. She was gutsy, too. In 1588, she decided to take on the mighty Spanish Armada, unbelievably enough. And more unbelievably, she actually won. This paved the way for more English exploration in the New World. Yet even with these successes, England would remain largely unstable, particularly in regards to its religious affairs, which is why it wasn't until 1607 that they actually settled their first permanent colony in Jamestown. Roanoke, before it, had disappeared by 1585. By the late 1600s, though, the English had settled much of Virginia and Massachusetts. The English certainly weren't alone, though. The French had settled largely along the St. Lawrence River, while the Dutch came largely to what would later become New York, what you can see here. But it was Spain, and to a much lesser extent Portugal, who had a much greater head start than those other European nations. And that head start yielded great benefits in the form of enormous amounts of wealth. Yet that wealth, too, would bear a cost. I once heard from a Native American studies professor of mine at UC Davis that the Spanish extracted so much gold and silver out of the mountains of Bolivia that they could have built a bridge out of silver to the New World. That's something else, but it would also lead to a massive amount of inflation. Let's see how that impacts them later.